the fishing regulations, it has things on access, but it also says if you're confronted by a landowner, leave. And I think that's good advice.
My very bottom line on trespassing, don't argue with a shotgun. I've been there. Yeah, some of the advice that I'm going to give you guys, if you're just starting out, is to stay away from anything like that. I'm going to give you some creeks to go fish, but I'm going to ask you not to fish them until you get a little more experience on dealing with trespassing and how to handle that. But yeah, avoid all private property until you know what to do and how to handle it. And I suggest that all public managed water for smallmouth is where you start. MDC has a ton of it. Go to any U.S. Forestry Service. So when you look in Tryon's book and he shows creeks, if they're in the U.S. forestry area like Blue Springs Creek is, you can access that legally. Natural Resources, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. National Park Service, and of course the St. James Foundation. Those are all neck of the woods that you can legally access any creek that's in those places. So you won't get into trouble there. Okay? Okay. So now, let's get to where you can go. And then we'll go into equipment. Equipment we'll save for last. You know what? Before I do, I ought to cover the last chapter that I wanted, and that was safety. Back in the day, before iPhones, you were pretty much on your own when you were out fishing. And I'm a loner. That is the biggest reason I creek fished, is because I go by myself. I have two suggestions. If you're starting out and you're older than I was when I was doing it, you might want to take a buddy along. Try not to do it on your own. Too many bad things can happen to you physically. Heart attacks, fall down, break a leg. Creek fishing is really cool, but if you're going to walk 2-3 miles up a creek, you got to walk 2-3 miles back. And if you're by yourself and something happens, snake bite, you name it, you're on your own. 90% of where I fished back in the day, I was by myself, and the cell phones, there was no such thing. Today, some of the cell phones work on these creeks. So be very careful when you're doing this. I had some bad experiences on Mill Creek right after MDC bought it with turkey and deer hunters. They were, be down there fishing and they'd shoot over my head. Totally illegal, but I ain't gonna argue with them. They were shooting at game. I had spoke to Feathercraft, and at that time Ted had Feathercraft logos put on hunter orange hats. I still have mine today. And so with that, you may not want to wear too much camouflage when you're creek fishing during hunting season. So the first place I'm going to tell you guys to go is the Upper Merrimack. Now you can access this from several locations, and everybody puts float trips when you say the Merrimack. I'm not talking about float trips right now. Scotts Ford. Scotts Ford is the top end of the Merrimack. And if you're a trout fisherman, you fish Cardiac and Suicide. Those are just above Scotts Ford. Cardiac is above Suicide, and Suicide is the last access on the Merrimack before you get to the trophy trout or trophy smallmouth bass water. And that starts at Scott Ford. So in the book, on the map 73, I really do suggest that you go to Scott Ford. You can park on the side, and there's a canoe rental right across the street, and I can't think of the name of it. They used to have a soccer team, actually. Anyway, you park in the conservation on one side. You can walk on the bridge and drop into the Merrimack and start smallmouth. And then that is the Merrimack smallmouth managed area. It starts there. You can take that for quite a ways down, miles if you want, but I don't suggest that right away. But you can access that if you want. Now that's kind of the farthest point I want to talk about. My goal is to try and get you guys in St. Louis to come out to a place that's maybe an hour away from where you live, if you lived in Webster or someplace like that. Anywhere along the Merrimack. I'm going to give you a secret creek. I'm telling you, don't access it right this minute, but it's called Indian Creek, and that is one of my honey holes. I don't give that up to anybody, but now I'm too old to say it's mine. I actually took my brother-in-law there. He took his buddy, and I didn't speak to him for 2 years. Indian Creek is a wonderful creek. Yes, Steve?
Isn't Indian Creek in southwest Missouri?
There's more than one Indian Creek, and I'm staying within the Washington-Franklin County lines right now. So we're talking about driving out of St. Louis down to, say, Sullivan, or before you get to Sullivan, St. Clair. So I'm trying to get in as close to St. Louis for you guys to some great water.
Is it Indian Creek on some map you could find? Because the only one I can think of is down in southwest Missouri.
If you can see the book, it's in the book.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have that
Yes,
book.
it is. Now, that is where a lot of his stuff is outdated right now. I know this creek like the back of my hand. And number one, some of the bridges that he talked about are washed out or all built back. It's in Franklin and Washington. If you access it into Washington County, you can park next to it. If you go to the Franklin side, you cannot park next to the bridges. Okay? That is all private land on both sides. It is considered somewhat a navigable stream. So if you read the synopsis that I told you guys about, you will learn that the description of a navigable stream is what was considered used by industry, floating logs and things like that, which they called it a highway. And it had to take place before we became a state in 1820, I forget. It had to be before we became a state, if those were navigable streams. And with that said, Indian Creek is considered a navigable stream, but the landowners on both sides carry shotguns and tell you to get out. So once you get in, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's one. You can access it from several different gravel roads. And once you get in and you're not disturbing, it's a good time. When I was a young man, before I was 16, my dad was creek fishing. That's why I creek fish. That's why I fly fish. Our home base creek was Red Oak. It's it's just north of Owensville, and it's a leader creek to the upper end of the Burbus. Gosh, I recommend that creek. Lots of private property, but it's in the book, and you can read the access points on that. These are really close to St. Louis. When I was 15, I was driving at night while my dad slept to get to Owensville, and we camped out on the gravel banks. Here's one is a starter creek. Mineral Fork. You guys have all heard it, I'm sure. If you've not fished it, this is the first one to go to. Mineral Fork is amazing. That's the creek I tell everybody, if you want to stand in a crystal clear, drink the water creek, no inhabitants other than cows, that's the creek to go to. You access it legally from the Kingston access point. It's an MDC right behind Washington State Park, and it goes straight in about 1.5 miles into the Big River. Okay? That is the #1 creek that if you've not smallmouth, you go to. Get your feet wet. Check it out. It is the #1 creek. It is from St. Louis. Well, I always came down 21 and accessed it that way. Today I live south, so I would go up. But I'm going to tell you, 21's 4 lanes almost all the way to it. It's nothing like it was with, with Murder Road, 2-lane 21. So you can drive 21 all the way to the road that takes you to the access. Drive past Washington State Park, and then the road will come in on the right, and it's a gravel road, but it'll take you right to the access point. Sweet. Highly recommend it. The next one. Now we're going to head a little south. Yes.
There's some other access points. Is there any other access points shown on that map? My dad grew up down that area, and we used to camp on the Mineral Fork, and we would go in through some back roads to get to some places which were really nice places to fish.
Okay.
So there's got to be some other places on that map to access it.
So here's the deal. I can tell you that's one of the things I want to tell you why this book is outdated. Highway F is another access point. It is the upper end of Mineral Fork. It's where the two creeks come together, and it's Highway F. You guys can go there, access it. It's gorgeous. It's amazing. It could become your spot. That is one that you can go when you feel like going by yourself. It's low water, ankle deep to knee deep at the most. It's gravel, rock bottom, perfect for smallmouth. It's amazing. The issue is, I think it's like 9 miles down the creek to the next access point. So it's not something you're going to go a long way and get out and drive back. So it's the place where you're going to go, put in, and I suggest when you fish 2 to 3 hours, you're probably only going to get about 1.5 miles to 2 miles at the most, and then fish your way back to your access point. Yes, that is. The second location was a campground west of 47. It is no longer there. The Kingston Ranch bought it about 10 years ago and closed it down. They now own all that property, and they're real butt munches. We used to access mineral right there at 47 on the high bridge. Had plenty of parking, conservation agents. I actually had my fishing license checked. You could drop down. It's a hard, stiff walk to the bottom of the creek. It's beautiful, but they barbed wired it on each side, and you had to cross through their barbed wire to get to the creek. Today, they put signs up, no parking there. Go figure. So right now, the easiest and legal place to access that creek is the Kingston access point behind Washington. If that's a creek that you want to fish and fish more often, walk your way up. You can walk 2.5 miles to the 47 bridge, or maybe 3 at the most. That is one hell of a day on the creek, if you can handle it. Yes, Steve?
I went down there and looked at the bridge. This was last year, and there is no parking signs. And I talked to the sheriff, and the sheriff, even though in the old days you could park there, I guess he's siding with the landowners.
Sure he is. Yeah. Yeah, and
will not.
Kingston Ranch is trying to sell too, so they're really being persnickety right now. Okay, any other questions on that? All right, I'm going to take you a little farther out. This is about a 2.5-hour drive, and if you really want to get into a smallmouth creek that you can drop in and wade until you can't wade no more, I highly recommend the upper end of the Black on the Middle Fork. I don't know if you guys have all been there, but I personally have a buddy that owns property at the confluence of the Ottery Creek and the Middle Fork. And you can access it there too. And that's where I suggest. And then you got Brushy Creek right there coming off that middle. Unbelievable smallmouth, all by yourself. I've been down there and fished from sun up to sundown with peanut butter and jelly. And the only person I had to talk to was a damn cow that walked in on the creek. Great smallmouth. And then one and final. I'm going to also send you to Sam A. Baker State Park, if you've never been there. Down on the St. Francis, unbelievable, crystal clear, rock bottom, access point. You'll spend all day. Camp there if you want, but Sam A. Baker is amazing. And it's someplace that I never hear anybody talk about. I don't know if you guys have been there or not. Okay. I'm ready to move on. Question.
Yeah, I got a question, Mike. Is anybody listening out there ever fished the smallmouth area of the Joachim Creek? That's only about 40 minutes from my house here in South St. Louis. I don't know how far it runs up near Victoria, Missouri, Hematite. All that water up there is beautiful smallmouth water. But I know they've got a smallmouth, the conservation department has a smallmouth area up there. I'm not familiar with any access points, but I'm just wondering if anybody out there fished it.
Joachim Creek, you can Google that and come up with your access points.
Okay.
I've been there.
I don't personally can steer you guys that way. What?
I was there within the last year, and I caught 3 nice ones right outside of the park, Walters Park in DeSoto. But that's awful shallow water up there, and there's not very many access points to it except right in DeSoto.
Steve, if you go down farther down the river, we used to fish up there when I was a kid, and we'd pay a farmer to go into his property, and he'd let us fish. There's got to be some access points because it's been within the last 10 years, I guess, that the Conservation Department has made that a smallmouth area. The farther down you go from DeSoto, the more water you get, the deeper water you get. But it's still wadeable for quite a ways down. But access points is what I was interested in more than anything.
Well, like I said, you can Google those. I didn't bring it up, Al, because it's too close to people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but for me to go smallmouth, and like I said, I only want to talk to a cow. And those are the places I'm talking about. So back on the safety thing, I'm going to mention a few things. On your cell phone, you want to, most of mine, including mine's an iPhone, and I have Find Your Phone. You can share that with your wife, as you know. Please, when you do that and you have those apps on your phone, set it up to where she can follow your phone while you're fishing in case you don't come home. That is one of the best things that technology can do for us as far as safety. Always let somebody know when you're going to be home. Never go and just say, I'll see you when I see you. Let them know where you're going to be, or at least that vicinity. And if you got your honey hole, then, and you know that's where you constantly go back, then share that with your wife or somebody who may come looking for you. And then, of course, wear your orange during hunting. Some of the other things, and that is, don't take your weapon. A lot of us are carrying conceals. Don't take it with you. Don't leave it in the car, because these are areas where the neighbors like to break in sometimes. Always make sure that your car has nothing on the seats. Don't leave any valuables or anything like that, because you never know what you're going to walk back to. They know that you're in that creek, and they know that if you're down far enough, you're a half hour away, then they can do whatever they want with your car. So always try to think ahead. I learned these lessons at cardiac and suicide. They were ugly there. So that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I got my point across. And I think that's pretty much on that. Just don't overdo it when you guys go out, because you get the fishing and you keep wading downriver and you don't realize how far you've gone until it's time to go back, and you're tired and you're walking up current. And we're not talking about a trout stream. If you go 2 miles, 3 miles down a smallmouth stream, that's a hell of a walk back when you're tired. As far as equipment and that is concerned, for you guys who have not, I'm going to suggest Mineral Park is the first place you go. That's swim trunks and a fishing shirt, a hat, your sunglasses, sunscreen. And as far as lunch and food, always pack something that you can drink. Don't drink the creek water. Oh my God. You can, but you'll regret it the next day. Always bring water, wipe your bottle off. I actually carried one of the, and I still use it. It's an empty bottle that filters the water. So I can take that creek water, run it through that filter and drink it. The reason I did that years ago is I got tired of carrying around the water bottle. They're heavy. So when you're thirsty, you can filter it and keep moving. Peanut butter and jelly was my sandwich, my food to go. Today they got energy bars, things like that are light. Please bring that. You get 2 miles down, you need the energy to get back. Plenty. A backpack or a fanny or anything like that. Keep all your trout gear at home. Don't take nothing. Leave everything at home. Them small flies, all you'll catch are creek chubs and bluegill. Smallmouth will never pay any attention to it. And as far as flies are concerned, you only need to carry a handful. At least I only did, because I carried a crawdad pattern. And over the years, I've fished a lot of crawdad patterns, but the most successful was the near enough. Damn hard to tie, so I buy them. Top water. Smallmouth flies are smaller than largemouth. And so your largemouth, if you can see this one, quite large. That's my frog pattern. Here's my frog pattern for smallmouth. It's a deer hair about the size of a nickel at the most. And that's awesome. On your minnow patterns, you only got to carry a couple. I carry muddler minnows in a small pattern, small size. double bunnies, clouser, and one final. And this is my go-to, and it still has blood on it. And that's the pearl shiner, sparkle shiner, or whatever you want to call it. It's weighted. And that's it. My crawdads. I also do the Miller crawdad, the Bill Miller, and I tie it in orange for the molting season. On the top, use your poppers or hard bodies and sneaky Pete's. And that's it. I don't carry nothing else. They all fit on something like this. I put it in my pocket. Tip it 3X. Don't fish anything smaller. These are bass and bluegill, and more so, you're going to hang up. You never lose a fly in a creek. Why? Walk over and get it. And that's about it as far as that. Rods?
Hey, Mike, what size
yes,
flies
sir.
are those? What, sixes,
I'm sorry,
eights?
Mike?
What size are those flies? Sixes, eights, tens?
Okay. These are all like in the sixes, all my minnows. I'm using stainless or salt water on my my shiners, and those are like in the twos and fours. The rest of them are around in the sixes. I do want to show one that if you can see that spinner on there, that's not an earring. That's a Joe Aminetti adaptation, and it's my catfish fly.
He hit me in the back of the head in Canada with that fly and knocked me out.
We were tying him in my garage when he goes, let's try this. And it works. Okay, so
Hey, Mike, real quick.
bass rods. Don't take your trout rod. Number one, you're going to creek fish. Don't damage your trout rod. Most of the rods that I suggest is around 6, 7, and 8. I fish a 7, 9 foot, or 8 foot. Creek fishing mostly was all 8 foots until the last 10 years or so, because you're dealing with a lot of overhanging trees. Backcasting is minimal. So 8 foot rods really do fit. 9 foots are great. You can use them. But I suggest any kind of a fly line that's weight forward, a bass taper, or a super weight forward fly line, and in the 7, 8, 6, 7, and 8 range. And it's not for the fish. This is, and to the rod, again, fast tip. I don't care so much about the butt, but your strokes are going to be sharp and quick. And what you want to do is you want a rod that you can almost flick with your wrist. That's the only way I know how to describe it. This is not trout fishing with a trout rod at Bennett Springs. You might be standing up against trees, almost touching your shoulder blades when you got a cast. A quick tip is going to allow you to kick something that's got weight in it out in front 10, 20 feet. That's really all you got to cast, but you got to be accurate. So a fast tip, I don't care, medium butt section or whatever, 8 to 9 foot rod, make that your bass rod. 2-piece is what I fished with. Don't spend a lot of money, or 4-piece now today. And that's about it. A reel can be a crappy reel. Put the line in your pocket. It don't matter. You're not going to fight the fish very far. The reel is really just going to keep you in line. And your fly line is going to get stepped on, walked on, and destroyed. So be prepared. Don't spend a lot of money on a fly line. Your leader around 7 foot. You want a stiff butt for the exact reason I said, 3X tip it. Don't fish no 6X. Stop that. That's Bennett Springs, 7X Bennett Springs, 5X Bennett Springs. You are dealing with fish that not that shy, but you're going to have to manhandle them. So you want something that you're going to be able to carry your energy to the fly and be able to bring the fish back. Okay. Wading boots are a must. Man, you can fish with tennis shoes as long as it keeps the rocks out of your feet. And then they make a wading boot sock. Highly recommended, money well spent. Leave your waders at home. Yes, Steve?
2 questions.
Yep.
On your tippet, okay, do you need like a taper leader or anything like
Yeah.
that? Well,
Yeah, Lucky Dogs at Feathercraft are a great bass leader, 7.5 foot long.
Lucky
Yeah.
Dog?
Yeah, it's called the Lucky Dog at Feathercraft. It's a house brand. They're not expensive. Buy 2 or 3 of them. They'll last you all year or 2 years.
And the other thing is you're fishing water like knee deep, and you said use a weighted forward or a sink tip line.
A weight forward, not a sink tip.
Okay, because I thought you said sink tip, and I was going to say for knee deep water, you don't really need that,
No,
do you?
weight forward, and we'll get to why I'm talking. And okay, so any other questions on equipment? Okay, the socks that I'm talking about are fold down rock guards. You need them because as you're walking, the stones get up in your boots, and you'll be taking your boots off every 20 feet. Don't do it. Spend the money, buy them socks. I actually, in the old days, cut my neoprenes and made my own wading socks out of an old pair of neoprenes till I started making money. Okay, so with that said, we'll move on. We covered equipment, flies, pretty much it. So how to fish it. So, and I'll end with that. When I fish a creek like that, and I'm sure all you guys do, you kind of take your trout fishing instincts and they kick in. That's fine. Most of your smallmouth are like trout. They like oxygenated, clear, clean water for what we're going to do. So when you approach, you look for not so much those bubble lines like you do in trout, but what you look for mainly are plunge pools and weeded banks on the outside of the bend. That's 2 of the best places to go. So what you do is, like you would with trout in a big old plunge pool, and it's usually kind of deep, and if you can't see the bottom, not because of dirty water, how deep it is, but because the bubbles and the current, you throw your fly in at the top, and you don't need a sink tip, but you let that 7.5-foot leader and another 18 inches of that tip, and let it take that fly straight down to the bottom and wash out the backside from the bottom out. And then you slowly kind of pull it back, and that's usually when you'll pick a smallmouth up out of those pools. You can try to cast across that, but I've been very, very not too successful. You'll get a dumbass every now and then, but if you want to catch the big guys, they're in the bottom of that pool where the current's not real bad, and they're eating all the minnows that get pushed down. And fish your minnow patterns. My sparkle shiners are weighted heavy. My my woolly buggers are weighted heavy. All mine, including my double bunnies. I don't have to give any action to them. The current does it for me. So all I'm doing is kind of keeping a tight line as it goes through. When you get to the outside where you got a bend in the creek, always try to work to your body to the side. And remember, they are very spooky. If you think trout are spooky, bass are worse. Those smallmouth can smell you, I swear. So you got to be stealthy, be very careful on where you place your body on that creek. I like to always make sure where the shadow is cast and where I'm walking, those bass can't find me. That's one of the reasons why I like plunge pools so much, is because they can't see me as well, and I stand way far back. This goes back to that fly rod. Even if you got a gravel bank and you got a beautiful pool in front of you, don't stand on the edge of that gravel bank. Stand back up against that weed. Get the chiggers, get the bugs, and learn to cast with those weeds to your back across the gravel, and then your line will lay on that gravel. And believe me, you'll pick bass up that you wouldn't pick up if you were standing at the water's edge. And if you want to, use that for your trout tactics also, which I do a lot of wild small trout, and it's the same thing. So as you're working your way down the creek, and notice I said down, that's how you do it. You walk the sides, you walk the edges, and you don't walk up to the pool you're going to cast to. If you see a pool downstream, make sure that you are well above or to the side. Always cast to the near side of where you're at, quarter it off, and cast and work your way around. So when you get to those weeds, I've caught the largest smallmouth on the rod I just broke on this guy right here, and I just let him float down and around the corner. My line was all in the gravel. The next thing I know, my fly just disappeared. There was no big largemouth splash, bash, or nothing. It was just gone. I tugged on it, and lo and behold, it was a fight. It was the largest smallmouth I ever landed in my life. No, I didn't carry a camera then. That was pre-camera days. And I can't tell you, I still think about that fish today. That's what smallmouthing does. I want you guys to get away from the park, go find yourself that honey hole. My rod never left the back of my truck. My fly is specific for my smallmouth. My ditty bag with my wading boots, I've stayed behind the seat in my truck. When the spare of the moment came, I let Vicky know and I was gone. Find yourself a hole that's an hour away from home, someplace that's secluded, that has the possibility of catching that guy, and you'll never go wrong. You will start to find yourself getting the urge to go fishing, and you'll drive there instead of Bennett Springs. And just take your peanut butter and jelly and enjoy the day. When you're tired, you drive home and it's less than an hour and you're sitting in your lazy boy. My God, there's nothing like it. This state has so much to offer in so many places. How many people? There's 28 people on right now, and I'll guarantee you within the St. Louis area, we could find 28 spots that would make you so excited, and it'll be all your own, and you wouldn't see anybody else there. I see 2 chats. I don't know what that is. Oh, okay. Never mind. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions, Mike.
Okay.
When we fish smallmouth on streams in Missouri, typically what size fish are you catching?
Oh, okay. That is a great question. Okay. I would say on some of the places that I now go and fish, now I'm not going to talk about the Merrimack. I'm going to say Mineral Fork, because that's where I want to go. You can catch anything at Mineral Fork smallmouth wise. Average size is going to be about that big. I'm going to say probably around 10 inches is the norm. And if you've got a 10-inch smallie, stream bred, been there his whole life except when he came up out of the big, he's going to fight. He's going to break water. He's going to be so mad. You're going to think you caught a 2-pound trout. The largest one that I ever pulled was out in Indian Creek, and that one there, I will tell you guys that it was anywhere between 18 and 22 inches. I still dream of that fish. We fought for a very long time to get to know each other. So if you hook into a 15-inch smallmouth, you better have 3X on. Any other? Yes, Steve. How come I'm getting the questions from the same people?
Well, because you've got a lot of, you're a good speaker. 2 questions. The Burbus River and the Big River close to St. Louis.
Yes.
Are those any possible as far as smallmouth fishing?
Upper end of the Burbus, Red Oak is one of them. There are a lot of little bitty feeder creeks with a lot of low water bridges. Yes, that is prime. The biggest problem that I ran into was back in the day when I was it was late 50s when I started as a kid. Those creeks are now under an Indian Lake, I believe it's called. So they totally dammed them up and made this humongous lake and put a community around it. But a lot of those creeks are still available. There's some in that neck of the woods. And that's where the fun comes in, Steve. Get the Missouri Smallmouth Adventures book and make it an adventure. Pick out 2-3 of those locations, take your wife and go drive. It doesn't cost you more than a summer's afternoon drive to find those creeks, look at them, and decide if this is an okay access. And here's the deal. If you do access it and you drop down that day and you fish, and all of a sudden you got a landowner that comes up on you and starts lighting your ass up, be the most kind, cordial person you've ever been in your life. I don't care what they say or do. And if it's a creek that you want to come back to, then start apologizing and just tell them, and here, this worked for me on several occasions. I'm a fly fisherman. I am a firm believer in catch and release. I don't leave tracks. I don't leave trash. I pick up trash. I'm a part of Stream Team 31. And my belief is if I'm on your creek and there's beer bottles or something, I will pick them up for you. You will then get that landowner's calming down, becomes reasonable, and he's liable to say, okay, you can come back. So that's how you do it. And that's how I've done it several times. And it has worked. That's how I got on Indian Creek back in the day. I was accosted by a landowner, and he was big and mean. He was a brute. And I opened up the back of my truck and showed him how I'd picked up trash. I got his phone number. Always get the landowner's name and phone number if they are cordial after that conversation and agree to let you on. And then make it a point to give them a jingle before you come down to ask permission. And you will probably, it's always worked for me. And I've got a little book that I will not share in my truck that has several phone numbers that I've acquired that way. Does that answer your question? Anybody else? Come on, guys.
Yeah, I got one more for you, Mike.
Who's that? Al, okay.
Here a few weeks ago, Ed Highside, he tied Hades creek crawler,
Yeah.
crayfish pattern. I missed it. I wasn't able to be there that night. We've listened to a guy by the name of Tim Hochschlag. He was at Smallmouth Alliance, I think, and he talked about fishing the crawdad. How do you fish the crawdad?
Oh, wow. Okay. I fish it pretty much like I was talking about with my minnows. I like to let it float down to the bottom and let the current bounce it around the bottom. Sometimes you can use an indicator if you're in somewhat deep water. And what I mean by deep water is 4 feet up to your 4 feet or down, not wading, but if you're fishing into a pool like that, if you've been in there, it will work. And what happens is you can use that indicator to float your crawdad just above the bottom of the creek through half the creek. Then eventually it'll hit the back of the pool and start tumbling along the bottom. A lot of times they'll pick it up that way. And if not, you've wore yourself out and you still think there's smallies in there, strip it back slowly, not so much against the current, but 3/4 of the way across that current. That's how I do it. And I'm also going to mention one more thing. On crawdads, notice the pinchers if you can. Pretty darn small. Don't ever tie crawdads with big ass pinchers. Break them off. Break one off all the way. Fish with one pincher if that's what you get. The bass seem to shy away from big pinchers. There's my thought on that. Yeah.
Well, Mike,
Joe.
I got a question for you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So what about like crossovers between like trout flies and smallmouth flies? Like which ones work for both, you think, besides like, your big woolly buggers? Any good ones you recommend?
None of my dry flies will, I can tell you that.
Well, sure, but for us who aren't
Okay.
purists like yourself.
I can only say this. If you're going to fish, and that's a great question now that I think about, Scott's Ford, you could literally park at Cardiac or Suicide and fish for your trout with your trout flies. And usually when I was doing that, they were large dry flies. But some of the what was it? The Slump Buster is a great minnow pattern for trout, and smallies will pick this guy up too. So when you're up at Cardiac and Suicide in that neck of the woods, I'll guarantee you'll pick smallmouth up through there too. A lot of your streamer patterns for brown trout work excellent on smallmouth also.
Mike, could I interject? A gentleman by the name of Mike Cruz, the Cruzy Leech. The story goes that he was going to fish for smallmouth and he didn't have any hackle. He was going to tie some woolly boogers. So he used the mohair in place of a hackle. He went out the next day to fish for trout with that leech. And instead of catching trout, he was catching a lot of smallmouth. So apparently that leech works for both smallmouth and trout.
Sure, it's streamer pattern. Yeah, I thought he did that down on the Little Piney for trout.
Well, I think he was going for trout, but he started catching smallmouth.
Yeah. I just found a letter from him that he wrote back to me when I was bitching about the definition of a fly in Blue Springs Creek.
Mike,
Anybody else?
yeah, Mike, this is Steve. So
Yep.
when you're fishing those Clouser minnow patterns or whatever, you're not casting like across the stream, letting it drip down and then stripping it back 6 inches at a time or anything like that. You're just letting it swing down.
Most of the time I'll let it swing down, but if I'm unsuccessful, then I'll switch over to what you're talking about. Changing up your techniques. Hold on, Joe. On the Clouser minnow, be careful. It sinks fast. Make sure that the hook is riding up, because the Clouser minnow will grab and snag on the smallest pebble in the bottom of the creek. And you'll just shake your head at how this rock gets stuck on the point of my fly. Yeah, Joe. Joe, unmute, bud. Hit your space bar. Thank you. Again, hold the space bar. Hold it. Push down and hold the space bar. There you go. Nope, you got to hold it. Can you unmute him?
Now you hear me?
Say it. Come on, Joe. You muted yourself.
Joe, let go of the space bar if you're holding it.
Okay. Anybody else got a question? Ed Heist, Harry, anybody? Wallace?
So Mike,
Yes.
all the
Turn your
places
camera on.
all right. All the places you mentioned were really pretty small creeks. You didn't mention any of the bigger rivers, you know, the Gasconade or the Merrimack. You mentioned Merrimack a little bit.
Well, the Gasconade's pretty far away, and I was looking for places closer to St. Louis. And but yeah, the Gasconade, all those places, I'm going to refer back to the book, Ed, and that is, look at the book, and it has got 200 of the most amazing places to go. And all I thought of was trying to direct you guys to some medium to small size creeks that are not that fished. People drive past them thinking, oh gosh, you know, like Al said about that other creek, the Joaquin, people leave it alone. And so, yeah, the Gasconade, all those places, the Little Piney, you guys can go to all them. They've got some beautiful smallmouth water. They are bigger. You will need a canoe or a kayak or something, or you're only going to walk so far on the bank and then run out of spaces. I'll tell you another place if you want to talk like that, and that's Times Beach. When was the last time you guys were at Times Beach? Exactly. I see you shaking your head, Priscilla. Times Beach has, you know what the chain of rocks looks like up on the Mississippi? Times Beach looks like that in that area, right outside of St. Louis. When I was a young shit, I used to fish there, and we used to swim above it. So if you want to just throw your smallmouth line in and only drive, 10, 15 minutes, try Times Beach. It's a public park. There you go. That's a big one. Who else?
That it?
Yeah, you got.
Hey, Mike.
No.
Hey, Mike.
Who said that?
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
In regard to when to fish, I mean, it's hot right now. Is it better to wait another month or so to fish?
No. Okay. So we'll cover that real quick. I think it's how did the smallmouth get in those little bitty creeks? They come up out of the Merrimack or the Big or the St. Francis, those big rivers when there's high water in the spring. That's usually when I always think to myself, okay, now the season's about to start. because they swim up into those creeks to breed and do all that other stuff. And then as the creeks recede, a lot of them will stay and a lot of them will leave. So the best time to go fishing is in the spring after high water. Now, right now, when it's hot, sure, you can go and you'll catch the occasional smallmouth, and I highly recommend going now. Just be prepared to deal with the heat and a lot of sun. But yeah, you can fish it now. And in the fall, when the high water comes again, you can try and fish then. But usually in the fall, for me, is nothing like spring after high water. Because you get all those eager beavers up in there in the spring after high water.
Got it. Good.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mike, this is Steve. In regards to like maps and stuff, I don't know, I can't remember. You used to be able to go through like Rolla, and there were like geological maps that show the terrain and everything and all the little county roads and stuff. Are those still available through?
I'm sure they are, but if you're going to try and find smallmouth water looking at a topo, you're working too hard. When you got, I got something else too. The Missouri Department, y'all seen one of these? I used to secure tons of them along with this, and we used to hand them out at the meetings every month. So get one of these, and they actually list all of the locations that the MDC manages. All the legal places, I don't know if you can see it, but it's got all the legal locations that you can access smallmouth water. Get one of these if you don't want to buy that book right away. Stay on public water and learn to fish these areas before you go and do what I was suggesting earlier. But I highly recommend getting this map. The club used to have a boatload of them, but I haven't been too involved in the club to keep up on it. And I'm afraid they might have quit making the trout map. I'm not sure. Or it was the smallmouth. I don't remember. But
I think they quit making the smallmouth, and I believe those are only for like the management areas, not necessarily.
Yeah, they are. These are management areas only. Safe places for beginners to go and enjoy themselves legally. Be prepared to have your fishing license on you at all times. I've actually had them jump out of the weeds on me on Mineral Fork, by the way, at 47. Yeah, any other questions? Is anybody going to do this? Did I enthuse anybody once?
Can I talk?
What?
Can I talk?
Yeah, you can talk.
I used to catch them on spiders.
How did you put those things on your hook? Didn't they bite you?
Yeah, but I got immune to them.
Spiders. Well, if you want to go for bluegill, yeah.
No, I caught smallmouth with them, buddy.
Great.
I've got big spiders, not little ones.
Anybody else?
Big spiders.
Anybody? Big spiders. Hey, I call Orkin for that. Big spiders. Anybody else is anybody enthused to go smallmouth fishing?
Yes.
I'm enthused, Mike.
I'm there, Mike.
Where did the deep voice come from?
That was Wallace.
Wallace. Okay, good.
Steve Leckich is enthused. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, you guys take the time, and Tom Hargrove and Feathercraft both sell that book if you don't have it. They're not expensive. I don't have any to give away. What?
I got one.
Yeah. But can you read?
So I think Ed Olander was planning a smallmouth trip, wasn't he? Before the COVID thing came along, he was talking about doing a smallmouth trip.
Where was he going to do it at?
I think on the Merrimack, I think.
No, it was the Niangua. It was.
Oh, yeah, that's right, the Niangua.
Yeah, he had Jeff Triggs lined up for that.
Okay. Is it going to go, though?
Pardon me?
Is it going to go? The trip?
Well, I won a trip with Jeff but last year, and we just can't connect because of what's going on in the world. But
yeah, the club was going to do a trip.
That's correct. That's correct.
And it was supposed to be in June, But it got canceled because of all the COVID problems and stuff. They just figured it'd be safer not to do it this year.
Yeah, but that was Jeff Triggs.
You guys, if you want to do something like that, and you want to do it with just, and I suggest you and your buddy, all of the canoe rentals up and down the Merrimack will do a fisherman canoe, and they'll rent you one canoe, a kayak if you prefer it. And I suggest it, get put in on the Merrimack up near Scott and float down to the park at 185. It's a good half day, 3/4 day trip when you're fishing. And the way, actually, Vicky always ran my canoe, and you fish the banks so slow and so methodical. It's just crazy how many smallmouth you'll pick up the upper end of the Merrimack fishing out of a canoe.
Mike,
Very cheap, very cheap, especially in their off season. You contact Merrimack State Park and they got a canoe guy there too.
Do they
Mike?
tell you, Mike?
What? Somebody say something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
do they
Mike.
shuttle you back, Mike?
I didn't hear you.
Do they shuttle you back
Yeah, it's all in the deal.
on the deal? Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
hey, Mike,
Yes.
I saw a video, a guy was fishing a white jig in front of the bridge right there where the water comes out of Bennett Springs to the bridge, and he was catching both trout and smalls.
Cool. You know, they catch smallmouth up there in zone 3.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, that's about all I got, guys. If nobody has any questions, I suggest for everybody's curiosity, Google this and look at the recreational rights that you have so that you know, but please, whatever you do, don't argue with somebody, a landowner. It never ends well. Okay?
Thanks a lot, Mike. It was great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Anybody have any business they'd like to talk about, or are we done here?
Do you guys want to hold another one of these later?
I was just going to ask what the people thought of how the Zoom meeting went, since it's our first effort.
Very good.
Very good.
I like it.
All right. Well, I will add the question field to the website for our speaker next month. People can submit their questions there. And then look for that survey I will be sending out soon enough for upcoming meeting topics.
Thank you all.
Mike, thanks.
Hey, wait a second. Jake, you had at least 3 people wanting to ask a question and you passed them up. I know Jeff had a question, M. Weiss had a question, and they didn't get them in.
I didn't have a question. I was just saying I was applauding.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was doing a thumbs up also. Do the meeting again. It was great.
Do another one? All right.
Very good, Mike.
Okay. Well, I was kind of like the guinea pig, and I'm so glad that everybody liked it. And Al, Steve, and I, and the rest of the people on the board will work on some subjects, and I think they're going to do a survey. So please take part in Al's survey that I think you guys are going to publish, so we know, or he knows, who to get to talk and what kind of interesting things or things that you guys are interested in.
I'm just glad to see you didn't hurt yourself during this video conference.
Hey, I'm going to tell you what. Those scissors are some of the nastiest, sharpest scissors I've ever had in my life. I'm going to buy a shorter anvil. If any of you guys were watching me tie flies last night on Zoom, I literally cut through my finger. And I don't mean a little one. Vicky's like, you need stitches. Real men don't get stitches. We just bleed all over everything.
Proud to die.
Okay,
Yep,
Mike, thanks.
there you go.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Mike.
That's all. I'm out.